Welcome to the Robert Hunt Financial Market Update. It's your host, Robert Hunt, where I look at the week's financial news that can be a little bit confusing, misleading, and take you off course, help to make it actionable, understandable, and clear. What a week! And therefore, what a show. The children at Vacation Bible School, we don't have them on as guests, so you'll just have to muddle through with me. But what a show in their absence. We've got some excellent data on the average holding period for a stock since 1920 to present. It's fascinating. We then look at why Vanguard might be the right brokerage for you. And it's a reason I bet you don't suspect. We then look at a wonderful set of quotations from a book called A Wealth of Common Sense by Mr. Ben Carlson. This came up in my X.com feed, and I thought I've got to share it with you. And then we'll close with a harrowing tale that the Dallas Morning News picked up that was syndicated to 40-plus papers throughout the country, dealing with tens of millions of dollars lost in a home buying ruse with home investors. It's a tale as old as time, and some of the markers that should scare us away, they ultimately led to the downfall of a lot of what looks like solid people, lost tons of money. So let us learn from this as best we can. But let's start at the top here. How long should we hold a stock? Now, you know the moniker. We like to keep that time horizon long. And because we utilize exchange-traded funds or mutual index funds, index ETFs, we kind of just hold the index and let them rotate in and out of these securities. Well, there's some excellent data that is the New York Stock Exchange puts out. The source here is Dresdner Kleinwort Macro Research. So sounds like a legitimate name, but what do I know? This was on the X.com platform. It's the average holding period for a stock. Now, I found the data fascinating. You know me, I want your average holding period to be forever. That's what Warren Buffett tells us to do. Indefinite. You don't want to be a speculator. You don't want to be a gambler. You want to be a farmer. You want to have a long, long time horizon. Wouldn't you know it? Did you know that in 1929, the average holding period for a stock was a little less than a year? Now, do you remember what was going on in 1929? I've got some older listeners, but I don't think you're that old. In 1929, it was the roaring 20s, and investors in the United States were using stocks to speculate and borrowing money to do it. Now, I find this wild. So, you remember what happens in 1929, 1930, Great Depression, stocks crashed, top to bottom down 90% from 29 to 1932. But check out the holding period change. The holding period in 1929, again, it was kind of a speculative mania, less than 1 year. It reached its peak in about 1943, at about 10 years, the average holding period for a stock in the New York Stock Exchange. Do y'all know what it is in present times? And this chart ends in 2007. I'm sorry to say, but I suspect the data can include, just keeps going. It came back in about 2003 or 4, so it looks like it came back to this less than 1 year of holding period. And now, why would that be? Why did it take about 80 years round trip for the average holding period? It went up, and then way back down. Well, I've got theories. Some of it can be attributed to CNBC and the financial news media. Some of it can be attributed, in my view, to the ease of access that we have with modern trading platforms. What do I mean? Everything, not just trading of stocks, has gotten easier with the internet age. You can buy on Amazon. You used to have to go out to the store. You can get your groceries delivered. You used to have to go out and do that. What has happened with trading? Same dynamic. You don't have to call anybody. There's no intermediary. There are intermediaries, but they're so good in electronic and digital, it really doesn't feel like an intermediary. You just click a button, away you go. So that, in my view, the ease of access has contributed to some time horizons getting short. No bueno. For my listeners in España, no bueno. Well, a gentleman named Mitchell Baldridge who's on the X.com platform and is a tax expert, had I thought just an excellent tweet. He works with business owners that sell and make a lot of money. He says this: the best advice I always give to newly exited founders: open a Vanguard account. Not Fidelity, not Schwab, Vanguard. Smart advice, you might think. They do have the lowest fees. Wrong. Mr. Baldridge says, this is hilarious. He says, their interface is so awful you will never trade. Has saved my clients millions. Ha, ha. I think he's kind of right, though. And this used to be something people celebrated. Bogle in particular always wanted the platform to not encourage frequent trading. And Vanguard has held on to that a little bit. Compared to other platforms, it is a little harder. I'll say this, though. On their mobile app, it's getting easier and easier. So I'm not sure how long this will last, but what I think Mr. Baldridge is teaching all of us here is that create a situation that inhibits frequent trading, whatever that is. That means you might need to create synthetic structures where you've got to check in with people before you place a trade, or you hire an hourly financial advisor and you check in with him prior to placing a trade. Some people, and I know it's expensive, but ultimately I think it's probably to their benefit, they'll work with an assets under management advisor just for this reason. So maybe they pay them 1% or 2% or whatever of their assets, but they have to go through this advisor to place a trade. Believe it or else, as much as I don't like fees, that may be cheap. That 1 or 2% AUM fee may be cheap. Now, I, of course, would recommend going another way about it, but if you think that you could risk gambling, do whatever you can. So a funny quote by Mr. Baldridge, but I think a true one. Vanguard is good. I want us to camp on some quotes here. This is a book, A Wealth of Common Sense, Why Simplicity Trumps Complexity in Any Investment Plan. This was tweeted out. This gentleman worked in portfolio management. He has this quote. He says this: I've spent my entire career working in portfolio management. That means he's buying and selling stocks on behalf of a fund. This experience has taught me that less is always more when making investment decisions. He's been listening to the podcast. Simplicity trumps complexity. Wow. Conventional gives you much better odds than exotic. A long-term process is more important than short-term outcomes. Wow. He says this: no one has a crystal ball. It can give you the necessary capacity to make rational decisions no matter what happens next. No one has that crystal ball. And then he brings it to us in closing. This is lifted from his book, but he says the real secret is that there is no secret to be able to make millions of dollars overnight. It only happens over a period of time. Building wealth takes patience. You can't be in a hurry. Fred Schwed, a financial writer who worked on Wall Street during the Great Depression. Remember, we talked about that Great Depression, 1929, 1930, 1931, 1932. He once said this. This is Fred Schwed, who worked during that Great Depression. He said, speculation is an effort, probably unsuccessful, to turn a little money into a lot. Investment is an effort which should be successful to prevent a lot of money from becoming a little. Isn't that interesting? Mr. Schwed, I bet he didn't think he'd get quoted in 2025, but when you say things that are wise, you get quoted. Long time after, 100 years after. So this just rhymes beautifully with our own philosophy. And I have just seen this time and time again. If we introduce complexity into any situation, it's like German engineering on a car. You just have more things that break. More and more breaks. And what I find very difficult is you don't quite know what's going to break until after it's broken. Particularly if you're new at doing either an investment deal or an exotic investment product. If it's your first time to participate in this sort of product, you lose money and gain experience. Well, that's not a lot of fun. And hopefully you did it with small amounts of money. You don't want to keep making that trade of getting more and more experienced at losing money. Not a badge of honor. Although you want to learn from your mistakes. That that really, really convinces me. Anytime I start hearing more and more variables in an investment deal or a product pitch, one of the things I help clients with is screening various pitches that come their way. The more and more variables in it are introduced, and either into the compensation structure of the person pitching the deal or the exotic nature of the formulation of investment returns, even if they are the most intelligent of people with the greatest of backgrounds, they go to the right church, they hang out the right places, the more complex it gets, you got to punt. You got to punt. It just doesn't end well. And we're going to close with a very sad tale of one such instance where it did not end well. This is it was a Dallas Morning News, Dallas Morning News article that was syndicated across various papers. Headline, tens of millions lost in home buying ruse. House flipping franchise owner accused of bilking his investors over years. This is by Anjanette Damon and Molly Simon, ProPublica. So Charles Carrier, who's the owner of a Dallas-based CNC residential properties, he recorded 5 notes against a single property on Glen Forest Lane in Dallas. So this is basically the first picture they show in this article. This guy somehow is just putting a bunch of debt on one house and purporting that there's not a lot of debt on these houses. So what this article does is it walks through the stories of these various investors. And it starts, this hurts the most, and I'll read a sad quote, but it starts with this gentleman, Ronald Carver. He said he was skeptical when his investment advisor first tried to sell him on an ugly houses investment opportunity 8 years ago. But once the Texas retiree heard the details, it seemed like a no-lose situation. Did you catch that, listener? The investment advisor is pitching this. Interesting. And the retiree thinks it's a no-lose situation. Second red flag. So if your investment advisor is pushing an investment, what do we think of first? Are you being compensated, Mr. Advisor, by this investment? This is why the hourly investment advisor, in my humble view, maybe not so humble at times, is the best because there is no product coming. I'm not compensated by a product. No hourly advisor should ever be compensated by any sort of product they pitch. This gentleman later in this advisor, turned out he got 2% of every nickel that came into this program. So he pushed it like crazy. And he has a very conciliatory quote at the end. But what it was, this Carver, this investor, he would lend money to Charles Carrier, who owned Dallas-based CNC residential properties. He was a franchise in the Home Investors of America house flipping chain, that We Buy Ugly Houses deal. You always saw those advertisements, We Buy Ugly Houses. It was a franchise, and they would borrow money. So what did he get in return, this investor? He got 9% fixed every year, paid out in monthly installments. Red flag. All right, listener, this is where you bring in the grandkids and the children, because this is one of the greatest gifts you can give them is education. Far better than money. Wisdom and education. All right, are they in the room? All right, children, listen up here. Whenever someone promises you a fixed investment, beware. Beware. Why is that? Why should you beware? Well, it's really hard to do. What you have to do is, what are U.S. Treasuries trading at? That is a fixed investment. That's a fixed investment that I know in the news cycle lately it hadn't felt this way, but purportedly is without risk. And it's a great benchmark for, what is this other person having to do to make good on their promises? And I have seen more fraud and malinvestment on these fixed rate promises. I would much rather see an investment that, hey, if it does well, you'll do well. If it does poorly, you'll do poorly. We can't promise fixed 9% is too good to be true. As this investor said, it was too good to be true, and he took the bait anyway. So what he thought was, great. Worst case, I'll end up owning these properties. They're worth more than the loan. So the idea was, hey, these guys will borrow money. It'll be tied to the house. You'll get that first lien, and if he defaults on it, I'll get the house. Oh, great. So this investor also talked his elderly father into investing. And here we go. And this gentleman, Mr. Carrier, is accused of orchestrating a years-long Ponzi scheme. What's a Ponzi scheme? Named after Mr. Charles Ponzi. You're making good on your financial promises, not by the merit of the investment, but by new investors bringing money in. Meaning, if I promise people 9% and I say I'm doing that because I'm flipping these houses, well, if that investment doesn't really work out or it never started to work out, I'm going to keep paying that 9% when new investment money comes in, and I'll make them the same promise. And as long as I can keep growing my base, I'm good to go. Ponzi scheme. This deal lasted, I think, a decade. So people loved this investment. Sadly, this wreckage is strewn across Texas. Wealthy investors, older people on modest incomes, there's been incalculable damage, this article explains. One investor lost $1 million, wanted to remain anonymous. He said he's ruined lives, incalculable damage has been done. Carrier, no surprise, declined an interview request. He, of course, thinks it's a mess, but he's kind of hemming and hawing. He's not, in my view, coming fully clean. This guy was incredibly successful. He was the kind of the number one franchisee in HomeVestors. He was teaching HomeVestors franchisees how to perform. He had a Wharton School MBA. I'm not sure if that may be like a starter school for A&M, maybe a kind of a feeder school, but Wharton School of Business MBA. And he had a lot of sophisticated investors. And people who know him said he was cordial but very direct. He always has his files in front of him. He looked very focused on the business. He seemed very trustworthy. Model franchisee. For 15 years, he was known as the golden boy at HomeVestors. Do whatever this guy says. What's the lesson? All right. Hopefully the children are still in the room. What's the lesson? We can't go off that. It's a little lazy just to look at someone's bio and say, good enough for me. Good enough for me. And this Robert Wellborn, this investment advisor in Granbury, which is just southwest of Dallas, he pushed this and pushed this and pushed this to a ton of folks, ton of his clients. He earned that 2% commission on all these dollars. You just don't do it. If they're not your advisor. Sorry, folks. If they're making 2% commission on an investment product, they're not your advisor. They're a sales person. And this is what I don't get. This is just, now I'm really riffing, but when the Texas State Securities Board or anyone else who's protecting investors in Texas, the great way to protect people is don't let advisors earn commission. Make sure people know these people aren't their financial advisors. I don't understand sometimes. It would be so easy to stop this, but we got to look after ourselves, folks. The cavalry is not coming. So we've got to know our stuff. So sadly, like a house of cards, this is how Ponzi schemes collapse. Not enough new money comes in. He stopped paying out these 9% fixed. People went bananas. Lawsuits ensued. Apparently there's little to no money left. So we'll see how this thing finally ends. It's a sad deal, very sad deal. And I think very understandable why an investor could get caught up in something like this. The lessons we learn are, hey, someone promised you a fixed rate investment. Ooh, a financial advisor, someone you think is your advisor, is pushing it and getting a commission. Ooh, another red flag. And then what happened a lot is people stopped checking the deeds. Like they got paid for 5 years and just stopped doing due diligence. Well, that's when this guy started going off the rails. So you got to keep having clean audits, and they just didn't do that. So what should you do? Keep those costs low, that investing simple, and that time horizon long, because that's what's going to give you the best shot on your investing journey. May not come at you next week. Travels, even podcasters travel. I know. What will you do without me for a week? Maybe you don't read the news. Maybe read books. Don't get caught off sides. But don't you worry. We'll be in and out this summer. There will be episodes. And just re-listen to some old episodes. Re-listen to those old episodes because tagline's still the same at the end. All right. Okay, we'll catch you in a few weeks. Until then.